The Charlottesville white nationalist rally happened nearly a year ago. Many call that a low point of the Trump presidency. We'll take a look at what has changed in a year's time, what's even gotten worse. Also, the president with another huge reversal. Now he's admitted that Donnie Jr. met with the Russians specifically to get dirt on Hillary Clinton. Then, delays piling up, furious riders, canceled trains, a shortage of engineers. That's just the past few days when it comes to New Jersey transit. We've got a full report. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. We begin tonight with Charlottesville, almost 1 year to the day. Let us start with a reminder of what happened last August. Hundreds of neo-Nazis and white supremacists converged on Virginia. It started as a protest of the removal of a Confederate monument, but it turned into a riot. That after counter-protesters joined in. One woman killed, 19 more injured. That when a car plowed into the crowd of people who were protesting the racists. Now here's a sample of what went on.
Jews will not replace us! Jews will not replace us! Jews will not replace us! Blood and soil! Blood and soil! Blood and soil! Blood and soil!
So in the aftermath, this is what our president had to say. This was after the violence broke out that killed an innocent woman who was there protesting the hatred you just saw.
You had some very bad people in that group, but you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. I think there's blame on both sides, and I have no doubt about it, and you don't have any doubt about it either.
Oh, but we did. Fine people on both sides, according to Donald Trump. One of those sides, anti-Semites, white supremacists. Since then, Trump has done many things to anger minority communities. Remember Haiti, African nations? Well, they were, quote, S-hole countries, all of them. Trump also said he didn't want more immigrants from there. He'd prefer more people from Norway. You figure out the meaning. Trump has also gotten criticized for personal attacks when it comes to prominent African Americans. This tweet, a twofer, quote, LeBron James was just interviewed by the dumbest man on television, Don Lemon. He made LeBron look smart, which isn't easy to do. I like Mike. Now listen to what he recently said about Congresswoman Maxine Waters, a Democrat from California.
I said it the other day, yes, she is a low IQ individual, Maxine Waters. I said it the other day. I mean, honestly, she's somewhere in the mid-60s, I believe that.
That's our president. Then there is the NFL national anthem protesters. Trump has called them SOBs, and they should leave the country, and even more. By the way, it was started by African Americans protesting racial injustice. And then there's Judge Curiel. He's from Indiana, but Trump said the judge wouldn't be fair on the Trump University case because he's Mexican and Trump wanted to build a wall. Turns out he wasn't Mexican. He was born and raised in our country, but again, why let facts get in the way? So now, a year after Charlottesville, many people are looking at the legacy when it comes to Trump and race. A political piece called The Real Lesson Trump Learned from Charlottesville explains what has happened since. Here's a portion of it, quote, in some ways, the experience of Charlottesville, as well as his ability to recover from any short-term crisis, has been empowering for Trump and his allies. 3 former aides said the takeaway from Charlottesville is the notion that nothing matters except for how things play. Award-winning historian Douglas Brinkley, he had this to say. Charlottesville defined Donald Trump. When he's in a controversy an hour, people's memories dissipate. But in the annals of U.S. history, Charlottesville will be seen as this day-glow moment when we saw that the president was a bigot. According to a Quinnipiac poll, nearly half of Americans agree with Mr. Brinkley. 49% say their president is racist, while 47% say no. This is 2018 in the United States, when a plurality of us believe the most powerful man in the free world, our commander-in-chief, is a bigot. Let me bring in our panel right now. Jeannie Zanos, a professor of political science at Iona College, also senior advisor at the consulting firm Applied Techonomics. She's going to help us break down polls in a little bit with a special election just tomorrow and the midterms fast approaching. Dominic Carter, political journalist and author. Joseph Pinion, Republican strategist and also GOP candidate for New York State Assembly. And Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent. And Joe, when we were looking as to where we are nearly a year later, and there's going to be a documentary that's going to be running on PBS. ProPublica did a part of it. I'll be talking to them tomorrow as part of this, and they really tracked the aftermath and really what happened since Charlottesville with a lot of the principles that were involved. But I thought about what Brinkley said, and I read the piece over the weekend, and I said, that's a powerful word. And Andrew and I have always said when people ever throw the Hitler reference around so casually, it takes all the power away from the awfulness of it. But if I was a respondent to the poll as to whether or not my president is racist, and I gave a fraction of what he has said just as president, let alone even when he was a candidate, the God's honest truth is, I think he is. And that's a horrible thing to say about anyone, but my God, that I can really say, and Douglas Brinkley is as revered a historian as we have in this country right now, who certainly can give historical context, I believe he's right. What does that say? First of all, do you agree with that or not?
Look, I think that the problem that we face, particularly with this administration, as it pertains to the issue of race, is that race is something that must always be viewed through a historical prism. And this administration is always viewed for how do we get through the day. And I think that when you have something as consequential as the issue of race, something that, again, like I said, I'm Joseph Pinion III. I'm born in this country. My father, his father before him, born in this country. You know, I'm the first Pinion that went to the polls when he turned 18. They could actually register to vote, right? I'm a 30-year-old, right? I'm not, my father's alive. He's living. He's breathing American. So I think when you look at it from that standpoint of individuals who live in this nation, who have felt the scars of and just the embarrassing aspects of Jim Crow South, people who have felt the embarrassing nature of racism, it's very difficult to understand how an administration does not necessarily approach the issue of race with that perspective. Having said that, I think again it becomes incumbent on us as a nation to say, how do we navigate these times?
But would you go as far as he and others have, that this president does not view blacks equally to whites?
I wouldn't go that far. I think that the unfortunate reality, I think this president necessarily places himself on a pedestal, doesn't necessarily view others.
You know, Dom, you covered Donald Trump as a private citizen for a long time, and for those of us with the fortune or misfortune of knowing the whole record, we would have 5 dead kids that were the Central Park 5. That he didn't like to spend a penny of his money on anything, but he took a full-page ad. He said he wanted the death penalty. They were later exonerated. We know his record as it relates to housing and how he tried to discriminate, he and his father, by the way, against blacks. We know that he questioned the legitimacy of Barack Obama, that he wasn't an American citizen. This happened long before he wanted to be president, and since. My point is, you heard what I said. Do you agree? Do we have a bigot in the White House?
That's a tough one. On a personal level, I wouldn't call him a racist. However, he is a master at playing the race card. Now, do you know what I'm trying to say there? He's an opportunist. Donald Trump is a straight opportunist, and he will play whatever card. To be honest with you, I think quite a few of us are somewhat racist, even though some are better at hiding it than others. But I think that Trump, is he destroying the nation on race? Yes, because he doesn't care. All he cares about is his base and staying in the White House. All you have to do, I wouldn't call him racist, but all you have to do is look at his tweets.
Well, Tom, here's where I have a question, though. And again, this is just stream of consciousness, because I can go on for an hour with examples. Remember how he said, what was the message to cops? Rough them up? Mm-hmm. Okay? We're talking about people of color here, putting them in the squad car. LeBron James went into his own pocket for $15 million to educate kids in a part of Ohio and Akron that are forgotten. Mm-hmm. And what does he do? Our president mocks him for it and calls him low IQ while he's putting kids in cages.
Why?
Well, I just said why, because he is pandering to the lowest denominator. Right. And to me, whatever your motivations are, I judge you on your actions and your words. Okay. To me, that was a message that these two guys, particularly one guy, LeBron James here, he doesn't rate. And I should find it interesting that the First Lady, by the way, came out and applauded the actions of LeBron James, whatever that means. My point, though, is how much more do we need here? What was the message that the NFL players kneeling? Come on.
Oh,
You
we all know.
black
We all
guys,
know.
get in line.
We all know. We all know.
But I think to your point, again, we feed into this narrative. Again, we're talking about things in many ways in historical context, right? When you talk about, why did it happen? It's because of the fact that we needed to the administration needed to turn the page on the fact that this whole story is breaking now about the third flip-flop on what's happening with Don Jr. in that meeting with those individuals that came to Trump Tower. And so even with the whole situation with the kneeling NFL players, and every time that somehow, out of the blue, we somehow come back to this
Somehow,
issue.
though, Joe, that almost, not excuses, because you're not doing that, but that almost rationalizes what he does because he's trying to change the subject. But what he's doing to me, Andrew, is, and I don't have any science for this, this is as angry as I've seen our country in the last 20 years. I'm not going to go to the 60s and 70s and stuff like that, but back then we had assassinations, we had wars going on and everything else. We have a daily self-generation of anger and somebody pouring kerosene on it. And that person happens to be the most powerful person. And he's using race as a tool to do it.
And that's where I think Joe's reference to historical context comes in most often, because we've seen this throughout our history as a nation where candidates will pander to an angry, racist, anti-Semitic, gotta keep the country for us sort of mentality. We saw it in the early part of the 20th century when the others were Italians and Irish and Jews and other groups that were coming from Europe. We've seen it throughout our history when it comes to race at multiple points. It's just that he has done a better job capturing that and using it as the energy that propels the turbine that has sent him into elective office, and is also the best at using that. He's also, by the way, reached the highest office of anybody who has used that mechanism as a lever for power. And so that's why it's so dangerous right now. It's because of the damage that he can do with that from the position that he's in right now. And Joe, he may be using this to deflect from other issues, but he has certainly set the baseline for it by going to it again and again and again and again. And just to finish up what everybody else was saying, do I think he's a hard racist? Do I think he wakes up in the morning and says, I hate black people? No. But I think he's a soft racist in that he just doesn't care about the plight or the impact that his words may have.
I think that we do ourselves a disservice as a nation when we view the conversation through the prism of, is this person a racist or is this person a bigot? And particularly, again, when they're talking about homophobia, when they're talking about racial animus, we as a nation understand homophobia as someone who wants to pick up rocks and throw them at Matthew Shepard. That is not necessarily what homophobia means. We understand racism as somebody who wants to string up black people and hang them from trees like strange fruit. That is not what racism means. It's talking about an unabiding, kind of acquiescence to the status quo, apart from what is in the best interest long-term of society. And so I think that, yes, while we understand at this table and can have a nuanced conversation about, is a willingness to turn a blind eye to racial animus racist in and of itself? I think as a nation, we have to talk about it in a different context, because otherwise,
but he's not and I'm sorry to cut you, he's not just turning a blind eye to it, he's feeding it, he's enabling it, and he's providing oxygen.
And by the way, guys, it's not just the feelings of 5 people at a table, Jeannie. Hate crimes are up. Incidents of desecration, whether it be for religious symbols or black churches or whatever else that's going on right now, they're definitely up. And there's been an emboldening of the worst denominator. We've seen this, the countless stories of people calling the cops on kids of color at a lemonade stand or students at a college here to say they don't belong here and everything else. This hasn't happened in a vacuum. This is happening because somebody has given the imprimatur that it's okay to be as ugly as you can be, whether it's via tweet or making a joke about someone's IQ or saying all people that come from a certain continent, they're all assholes. Like, to me, that's the real danger and fright here, is that he has given license to people to just say and do horrible things. We'll talk about the targeting of media a little bit later in the program, but he's given license to this. And that's why I don't give him a pass for whatever his motivations are.
Yeah, and I think what's striking to me, it wasn't that long ago that we sat around this table and had a debate as to whether, in fact, we were in a post-racial society. And that was just after Barack Obama was elected. For about 2 to 3 years, there was an ongoing debate. And the outcome of that debate was things like Shelby County, where the Supreme Court said, you know, we can strike down the Voting Rights Act because we've elected a black man. And because we've elected a black man, we shouldn't be holding these states under the same thumb that we held them in the 1960s when blacks weren't allowed to vote.
Yep.
And so it's striking to me how much of this is a reaction to the election of Barack Obama, and quite frankly, all of us turning a blind eye to the real racial animosity that was brewing there. Because, you know, Donald Trump can bring this to the surface and he can make it seem like you can go out and do it, but he didn't have to do much to stir this kind of animosity and this kind of anger. And it's truly shocking. And my fear is that it's not just Donald Trump, but somebody else is going to come along and do the same exact thing, because he has set up this playbook. And by the way, I would just say one thing. You know, you mentioned that he's the first person to be elected to do this. Not if you call the Southern strategy that the Republicans used to elect Ronald Reagan, which was truly a racial strategy. A racial
but that
strategy.
was the election, and this is in governing.
But it's exactly what Dom was talking about. They used race, not that they were racist.
Fair enough.
But they used race to generate votes
Fair
for
enough,
Ronald
but once
Reagan.
they got into office, the difference in approach in all of this between Reagan and Trump is like night and day.
I mean, was it
There's-
though? I mean,
I don't know how much
look, I
they-
think that the hard truth, and I think the most frustrating part about most Americans, is that I think they are waking up to the fact or the realities that black and brown people have been talking about for decades.
Forever.
Right? Forever.
Let's call it. Let's be. If me and you were in the room by, I know Richard, I know you, if we were in the room by ourselves right now, we would both say this is nothing new to either
you know,
one of us. That this has been our lives, all our lives, and it's going to be our kids'
know what was
lives,
new,
no
Don?
matter who the president is.
And I grant you, you guys had to talk when I never had to have to talk with the kid about
It's not a fun
what you do when you
discussion.
and I know that. But I'm still not adjusted to the fact the President of the United States saw guys doing the Nazi Hitler salute here with torches, saying Jews' blood, talking about white supremacy, sending them back home and everything. He saw that video. He saw a person plow through a crowd and kill an innocent woman. He saw what you're seeing right now. And he came out the next day and he said, they're okay too. And whether he's pandering to the base, God forbid for this country, whatever he's doing, he still chose to do that. And to me, I never thought I'd see a day where a president of the United States would literally drag us down to the lowest denominator here. But a year later, I'm learning not to be surprised. All right, when we come back, people are comparing the president to P.T. Barnum, and he loves a comparison. They may be talking about a comparison a lot more apt than you might think. We'll tell you why. Stay with us.